Good morning, everybody. What I want to talk about here is the very first book illustration project I was involved in. It started in 1992 when I began doing magazine illustrations for a small press publisher out of Baltimore called CD Publications. I was approached by the publisher in 1993, the following year, to draw the interior illustrations for one of their very first hardcover book projects involving story collections called Thrillers. This is the book that was published. I didn't do the cover. The cover was done by Charles Lang, but I did all of the interior illustrations for a novelette by Rex Miller, several short stories by Nancy Collins, 2 stories by Chet Williamson, and 1 story by Ardeth Mayar. Sorry if I botched the last name. This is the trade edition. I don't know how many copies were printed. I'm not sure if it's out of print at this point. But this is what the trade edition looked like. Silver embossing on the spine. Nothing to write home about with the end papers. And right into the book itself. Joe Lansdale wrote the introduction. Again, Rex Miller, Kowloon, Chet Williamson, Dusty Death, and Watching the Burning. Then 4 by Nancy Collins, and 1 by Mr. Mayar. CD also produced a limited edition, I guess you'd call it. It wasn't lettered or numbered, but it was slipcased. And the only difference between the books, binding was the same, dust jacket was the same, but what was different was this. They added a signature sheet. Everybody got to sign it, including Richard Chismore, the publisher, cover artist, interior artists, and all the writers, including Joe Lansdale, who wrote, like I said, wrote the introduction. This is a PC copy, of course. I didn't get any of the 500 copies, it says here, of this edition. So obviously the trade edition was more than that, maybe a couple of thousand. But that was the only difference between the 2 books. So you paid extra for the slipcase and the signatures. Pretty common in those days, I guess. I was told that there might be a Thrillers 2 coming out sooner or later. And eventually there was one, but I was not asked to be involved in that one. However, I was very pleased to be involved with this one. What I still have is are all of the original illustrations that I did for this, which I'm going to share with you. So we're talking 1993, when I didn't own a flatbed scanner. I believe my personal computer at the time was still the old 512K Fat Mac Macintosh, the one in the beige plastic case with a handle on the top. I didn't have any of the digital software like Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, or Aldous Freehand. I believe Photoshop was made public in 1990, and I certainly didn't have that. So anything that I drew in these illustrations had to be camera ready. That's the phrase printers use. If the illustrations that are submitted are ready for the printer's camera to shoot, to convert into a negative at that time. Again, we're talking pre-digital. So if I needed a black, it had to be black. If I needed something blurred, I had to blur it in the artwork itself. There was no way to fix anything. So these all had cover sheets of typing paper, I guess, and you can still see the evidence of the glue and the tape that I used. Just to give you an example, let me get rid of this thing first. This is the first illustration in the book for Kowloon. On the back, somebody, either the publisher or the printer, did this to indicate to the bindery where that particular illustration would go in the finished published book. For my part, all I did was identify the story and the number of the illustration, in this case the first one. I actually wrote down here MS page 1-2, and that would just confuse people, so somebody rightfully so crossed that out. This is very heavy gauge coquille board. I had discovered coquille board by then, by 1993, and it was for me, the perfect ground for doing pencil illustrations. I was very careful to have a very good crop edge. I didn't put the crop marks in. I should have, but I didn't. And my little name and identification rune down here was much too close to the edge. Shouldn't have been there at all. Would never do that now. That I just made up. I had a very large loose leaf binder that had magazine clippings of faces, eyes, hands, anything that would be difficult to draw from my head, where I would need some type of extra visual information in order to draw accurately. So I'm sure that I had some sort of magazine photograph or illustration, for magazines like People or National Geographic or Life, all those old magazines back in the days of print. And that's what I used for those eyes. This was interesting. I had to draw this street scene, I'm guessing in some place in China. I had no idea how to write Chinese calligraphy at all. However, in the kitchen drawer was one of those takeout Chinese menus from a local Chinese restaurant, and all I did was just look at what was printed on there. I have no idea what they said in Chinese, and I just copied them. So I have no idea what these signs say. It could be, shrimp fried rice. I don't know. If someone knows how to read this, I'd be interested to find out what exactly I'm I'm really saying here. And very early on, when I didn't want to do any type of detail, especially for something this small, just silhouette it. This next one is for a story called Dusty Death, which I think was a Chet Williamson. Used my own hand to draw, and since I'm left-handed, this was my right hand, so I used my left hand to draw my right hand. This is my dad's 16-ounce rocket hammer that had been left to me. I remember this drawing was exhibited in a world convention out in Kansas City. And I just happened to be standing there when the other illustrator, Canigula, I believe is the way he pronounces his last name, he was there with someone else, and he made a point of pointing out, I think he liked this, not sure. I never used to interrupt people when they were looking at my stuff in those conventions. I just let them. Watching the Burning, another Chet Williamson. Now, I found out after the fact that the publisher's wife had to explain this to Richard Chismore about what the heck was going on here. He didn't understand what this meant. He published it anyway, you know, it's in the book. Very early on, again, became almost my signature, having camera angles, cinematic camera angles, whenever I could get away with it. They didn't have drones back in 1993, at least not to my knowledge anyway. Maybe the military did, I don't know, but I thought, what if I was looking right down at this guy mowing his lawn? That's the result. And there's something burning for sure. Okay, this is one of the Nancy Collins stories. Charity Ward. Very illustration source rich. I could come up with this image because this is in the story itself. Very weird. Person in a bed. There's another story after this one, which I also illustrated. I forget the name of it, but you're not going to see that one. I have it, but if I put it in this video, I know that it would be flagged, and it would probably result in the video being taken down. So I'm just not going to do it. As far as subject matter goes, I would never ever do something like that now. Of course, I'm retired, but if I was still illustrating, it just wouldn't even enter my head to do it. But I did it then, and they accepted it and they published it. And if you want to see it, go find the book. For this story, okay, this is Winter Stalk. I believe this is the art of Mehier. I keep butchering that name, sorry. More that smoke coming out. In this case, a brass door keyhole. There's actually two for Winter Stalk. Lit match, and this had to be exactly as it would be shot and printed. I couldn't do any manipulation, so everything had to be exactly it. And finally, the last one, again, that's cinematic camera angle. third one for Winterstock. Winterstock had 3 of them. Wow. Okay. Looking straight down at this poor guy. I think he's got his hands tied, and he's not liking what's coming down at him. I think this is my favorite one, and it's the last one in the book. There are 2 other illustrations here, which, for reasons I'm not sure of, I no longer have the original art for. Let me point those out in the book itself. This is an illustration for a Chet Williamson story called, another one, From Dusty Death. Man in a car wailing on someone. And the other one, which I can show you, is for a Nancy Collins story called The Killer. Apparently somebody got killed in a motel room, and all I show is the hand. Again, cinematic camera angles. This is, I used to call this from an ant's viewpoint, or an ant looking up at the world. I would see this hand in the window. But you can see they were very generous in the margins. Essentially, the image area here copied the image area of the type, which I thought was very, very nicely done.